folks, Pratik here. Nice to see you again. Happy December. So today I'm in a good mood because we had a great week at Anthramind, did some amazing work and onboarded two very large customers. This morning, I hit the gym, crushed it, got a haircut, and now I'm here and recording this podcast. So I'm in a pretty good mood and very thrilled with how the year has been while doing like a yearly recollection and everything. So I had a very good time and would like to jump into today's podcast, right? So I mentioned that I want to talk about personal finances. What does it mean? What does it mean going from not even zero, less than zero, all the way up to big tech, saving a lot of money, all of that, right? What does that entail? What habits do you need? And, how do you go from debt to big tech to, a founder, which is sort of back into debt because let's face it, it's not glamorous. You go from like, six-figure salary to 300K, 400K to, pretty much zero overnight. And even with like a pre-seed funding or a seed raise, you make less than what you would in big tech. So there's a lot of considerations there. And I'm very happy that a lot of people gave me good feedback. Putting out yourself out there is pretty tough, right? Where you have to essentially be very vulnerable and be like, hey, I was eating ramen every night until I got a job at Google. And even then I had to wait like a couple more weeks to get my first paycheck because you know how the paycheck schedule works, right? It was a very tough time, but I'm very thankful for that time, in fact, because I learned a lot, right? You don't really learn a lot from comfort. You learn a lot from adversity. So that's why it's been a great experience, a great journey so far, a lot of variability. So my life feels very varied and rewarding in that fact. And as a year-end update for Anthramind, did some amazing work this year. Just this week, we onboarded two new customers. We're pretty big and are doing some very interesting work with them for like the most sophisticated post-training data use cases. 2026 will be the year where I can share more about this stuff because, we're still early on and at the tip of the iceberg. And there's so much to unpack and so many lessons that we've learned that I'd like to share over the next few podcasts over the next year. So this is not going to be like just my personal stuff. We're going to be going more into like AI evals, post-training data, what all of that means. How can we all get better at it? How can you use it at your workplace? Because guess what? If you're using LLMs in any capacity, you need it. If you're working at an insurance company, you want to bring LLMs into the fold. Guess what? You need post-training data. You work at a fitness tracking app. Guess what? You need that if you're injecting AI in any capacity. So that's why it's so important, and I'm very happy to talk about it. But let's get into today's episode. Episode number 5. Can't believe it's been 5 of these, and I feel like I've gotten better at each of these episodes because I get so much good feedback from you guys. And episode 5 is the financial stack, going from debt to founder, and what that meant for me, right? I went from ramen to, making good amount of money, back to ramen profitability, and now Anthramind is taking off. I wouldn't say wherever you want to be yet, but I'm very bullish on the future. All right, perfect. Welcome aboard if this is your first time here. My name is Pratik Karki. This is episode number 5. And today's talk is about wrapping up 2025. And I'd love to share more about my personal finance strategy, how I went from debt to having saved enough money to found Anthramind without worrying too much about it. So if you're new here, hi, I'm Pratik Karki. I'm from Kathmandu, Nepal. And I was at Google for 3 years before I founded Anthramind. Huge AI guy, hugely bullish on AI. I worked at AI in Google, and now I run a post-training company, Anthramind, in Silicon Valley. And we work with some amazing clients, frontier training labs like Deep Cogito, amazing healthcare labs that we work with, fintech companies doing some interesting work in like fraud classification. So you name it, there's very interesting work being done over there. And I am really obsessed with the post-training space because that's where the applicability is, right? We're still infrastructure, but we're helping companies apply AI in ways not even thought possible. So that is my short story. And let me walk you through the plan for today. I normally start off with a Friday positivity. And during this time, I talk about something that is personal to me or something that I see across the world and how it can be framed as being positive. It doesn't have to be all happy, like, oh, look at the world and how amazing it is. No, it's like finding happiness even in adversity. That's the main thing, right? There's a amazing person that I love citing all the time. He is somebody who came up with the idea that you can be happiness as long as you have your own free will, and it doesn't matter what. And his story is amazing, and I'm blanking on his name, unfortunately, which is not something I wanted to do, but that's where we're at right now. So he was a Holocaust survivor, and in his mind, even though he was in a concentration camp in Germany, he was like, you know what, I still have my free will. They can do anything they want to me, but they cannot take away my free will. And that's truly inspiring things. Taking stuff like that, it doesn't have to be to that extreme, but like, how do you find positivity in anything? How do you make sense of the world, right? And then I am going to the topic for the week, which is the financial stack, going from debt to founder. And finally, I end with my favorite segment, which is what have I been reading, watching, and playing. Let's go ahead then. Perfect. So looking into the bright side, right? That is today's message for Friday positivity. Over here is a very funny meme, which is the bus, the two guys in the bus. If you're listening to this on audio, unfortunately, you cannot see this, but it's like the Drake meme, right? Where the unhappy one is like, life has no meaning, so nothing matters. But the happy one is like, life has no meaning, so everything matters. So what does that mean? It falls into this concept called optimistic nihilism. So nihilism was something that was coined by this philosopher Sartre, and it's talking about like how there's no true meaning to life, right? Or like there's no true end goal, right? You live and you die, and everything just keeps on going. But the thing is, it might seem very dour in principle, but when you think about it, if you look at the glass half full approach, then if there truly is no meaning and you're a nihilist, guess what? It is a great time to be optimistic, because if there is no meaning to life, then everything you do matters. You get that one life, right? If you truly are beings floating in space in absolute entropy, that means that everything we do does matter, right? Like, if nothing matters, then that relationship that you have, or the time you spend with the kids, or that book that you read, or that meal that you ate, everything matters, because that is what life is, right? We give meaning to things that we ascribe to. And if nothing matters, then this is your cue to shed yourself of all social responsibility or pressure or traditions, whatever it is, right? Whatever is holding you back, and really go for it, because at the end of the day, nothing really matters. I mean, that's kind of a motivating principle, right? Nothing matters. Why do I need to stick to X defined job or whatever and live my life a certain way? Why do I not go for the fences and do everything I can, right? So take that into consideration. If you think you're being held back, you want to launch that YouTube channel or do a podcast or launch that business or put yourself out there for that internal promotion by advancing a new project or something like that, go for it, because everything matters, because nothing really matters. So it is take a healthy dose of optimistic nihilism, if you will. All right, perfect. So this week's topic, the financial stack, going from debt to founder. So on the left, I have a picture of what I used to eat every night before I got my first paycheck at Google. And this is a pretty cool recipe. It's not just like a ramen cup, but it's called a ramen fried rice. You take one egg, you put it into like a frying pan or a wok, beat it, mix it up, scramble it, put microwave ramen in there, and put a cup of cooked rice. And you mix it all up and use the seasoning from a ramen packet. And it turns into a pretty nutritious and good meal. I mean, honestly, I've had it over the last few years, a couple of times at least, whenever, it's like a struggle meal, grilled cheese sandwich or, whatever. So that's it's like a meal that I used to have, and, no shame. Like, it's like cost like less than $1 to have. That's how I survived until I got my first paycheck. And it is a tough time, right? Because when I was in my grad school and everything, I had like a lot of loans. I still had to make payments on those loans. I was helping out my family. And by the time I started at Google, I was $22,500 in debt, a mixture of credit card debt, which is very high interest rate, and student loans, which I had to take additional student loans, even more than they typically give as part of like the scholarship, right? After getting my first paycheck, even prior to that, I'd done a lot of planning. I looked at all of their 401k plans, Roth IRA, whatever you call it, figured out exactly what I need to do, figured out the best strategies for paying back the debt. And, 3 years later, I paid off my student loans. Sorry, it wrote it down as student loans for some reason. I'll do a lot of voice dictation, so apologies for that. But I paid off my student loans, paid for my wedding, and paid for my immigration process the entire way. O1 visa. There's upcoming news about the green card, but don't want to jinx it. But did all of that in 3 years. And I also had like a mid 6-figure net worth. The chart on the left-hand side, that's like a snapshot of I believe my Vanguard balance. That is, I forgot. It's not my 401k. I think it's like the ETFs that I have over there. But it's part of it. And, I'll talk a lot about it, but it essentially gave me enough of a safety net to risk it all and be like, you know what, I'm fine with leaving my job because, I'm in my 20s. I can always go back to a white collar job. Maybe it's not as prestigious, but it's enough for me to pay my bills and, do the things in life like, have kids, buy a house, whatever. And that's why I was ready to be like, you know what, I don't care if my salary goes to zero. I know that there's something over here. I want to build something over here, and I will stake my entire life into it. So that's the lesson over there, right? And before going forward to my general use case tips, I'll leave a few like disclaimers over here. So disclaimer number 1, yes, not everybody's situation is going to be the same. Even if you have debt, you may not be as fortunate enough to, land a job at someplace like Google, which has amazing perks, right? 401k match, amazing. Maxing it out is like $40,000 to $50,000 a year, and that's a lot of money, right? Most places have a 3% match, which means even if you make a $100,000 salary, that's like $6,000 at most, if you just meet the match. So there's a lot of things like that. Google had a really good student loan repayment assistant program, which means out of I forgot how much the total was. It was not $22,500. It was a little bit less than that. Student loans I had, I think $19,000. Out of that, $6,000 was matched by Google. So I had a lot of help there, and will not deny that. So there's a lot of like different things, right? So, but if you're somebody who is in big tech or a company adjacent to it, like the Databricks of the world or XAI, whatever, there are probably programs like that you can look into, and you'd be surprised how much you can find if you look into it, right? And there's a lot of other considerations as well. Like if you do need to go to grad school, a lot of jobs will pay for it. Or if you are considering grad school, then do not take loans to go there. Instead, become a teaching assistant like I did, which is how I paid for my grad school, right? So there's a lot of different caveats there. Everyone's story will be different. Everybody's journey will be different. The main takeaway here is not going to be like what you need to do specifically for your situation. It's more about what are the key considerations you should look out for, why you should aim to be not where the average is, always aim to be where the 1% is. That's how I live my life. I do not care if the average person is X amount in debt. My goal is like, what is the 1% of people at? I do not care if the average person makes X amount of money or has this much in retirement savings. My main goal is to figure out what the 1% has and how I can get to that level, because you want to raise the average, right? If everybody raises the average, then society as a whole does better overall. So that giant rant aside, let's go to more of like the practical things, more of like the distilled lessons that I was thinking about. So I'm going to grab some coffee. All right. So simple finances. If let's say you're in debt, or you feel like you could be saving more, or you want to save more for like a big purchase, like a car or a house, here are like the 3 core lessons. Number 1, spend less and fix leaks. So what does this mean? Spend less doesn't mean like stop eating or whatever, man. It means like think of what really matters. What are the needs versus what are the wants? And I'll be the first to say that I started off with only thinking of needs, and then, once you get like a cushy job, you start spending more on wants, right? When I had only needs, guess what? Video games were out of the budget. I was eating cheap, cooking all of my meals, whatever you call it. But then when you make more money, then you spend more on stuff, right? You go on a trip, you are less frugal. So there's a lot of things like that. So even if you are making good amount of money, you should still spend less. Few things, right? If you spend more on like the latest phone or something, guess what the only winner is? The only winner is the phone manufacturer or whoever is the marketer. You're not really winning over there. You're not really winning by having the latest devices or whatever. You are not winning by buying expensive clothes because, the only thing you get is like I wouldn't even call it an asset. It's just something, right? Versus if you spend less and invest the money in real assets, it can even be a car. I mean, a car is like a terrible asset, but it is still an asset at the end of the day. You buy a used car for $30,000. 10 years later, you sell it for $20,000. That's still an asset. I mean, it depreciated, but you also get use out of it. So there's a lot of things like that. I would say try to be less consumerist. That is what a part of like, if you, and this is controversial, but like if I mentioned this last week, if you care too much about other people's opinions, then you're forever going to be a crab in a bucket. But if you do not care about what society says, and you decide to yourself, okay, I need to save $100,000 so I can buy a house, and I will sacrifice buying that handbag or some expensive clothes or whatever, then that's better on you, and you should just focus less on what other people say. And the second part of this is fix the leaks. What does that mean? If you do not have a budget, like a true budget, and you do not know where money goes, then it's very hard to be accountable. You need transparency with yourself. So every month or like every transaction, if you're not aware of what it is, where the money is going, that's on you. If you set yourself a $2,000 spending goal for the month, for example, but you do not know what each item that you spend for is, then it's very easy to have a leaky bucket, and that's when you lose a lot of money, right? You could be thinking to yourself, oh, I spent $2,000, but in reality you're spending like almost $4,000. And actually that's happened to me a few times. I budgeted food budget for very little, like $700 for the two of us, but then some friends come to visit, everything, and that same month the food budget ballooned to $1,400 because I was not being careful. And I was like, oh yeah, we're just doing the normal stuff. But before I know it, two or three dinners with friends who came to visit, like it was like a couple of $100 each, and it snowballs from there. So fix those leaks and adopt a mindset that you want to spend less. People complain about how hard it is to live, buy a house, save, whatever, but they are not willing to make sacrifices. Like the people that you see, the real people that are buying houses in their 20s or 30s, like live extremely cheap and are fine with eating like rice and beans for dinner, right? And making sure they're getting to those goals. So if you really want to fix your finances, then you need to make those drastic changes. That is the second point, which is make those drastic changes if you have to. If you want to save more, you want to build to a goal or retirement or whatever it is, and the current situation is not working, the fixes that I said may not be enough. Canceling that Spotify membership will not be enough. You might have to do something drastic, like move back in with the family if you can. Find a roommate, find a cheaper place to live in the suburbs, whatever it is, right? Move to a different state to find a job. Be open to all of those things. If it cannot be fixed by just spending less and fixing your leaky bucket, sometimes drastic changes need to happen. You might have to go from like a studio apartment to living with 3 roommates. But if you have a goal in mind, then it becomes easy to digest, right? Some changes like that. And finally, plan like your life depends on it. If you do not have a 6-month emergency fund yet, plan for it. Figure out how you're going to save enough money for 6 months based on your current conservative estimates. Figure out how you're going to put money into a high yield saving account. Plan for the best interest rate. I use Lending Club myself, and they have like a 4.5% interest rate. Plan those things. Figure out how much money you need to put into your 401k, Auth, etc. And think about those things. Think about how much money you want to have liquid versus illiquid versus tax deferred by the time you're 30, by the time you're 40. Figure those things out. It may seem very daunting and overwhelming, but if you are very clear and you're very transparent with yourself and you do not lie to yourself, lying to yourself is one of the worst things you can do, by the way. Do not lie to yourself and be like, oh, I will somehow have like $50,000 extra in my bank account by the time I'm 35 without changing anything in my life. That is not going to happen. So figure that out. But these are like the 3 core tenets. Figure out your lifestyle, make drastic changes if you have to, and plan. You cannot substitute these things. And it's not as simple as you cannot improve your finances just by tweaking a few things. It's a lifestyle change. And, it's not for everybody. Like, but at the same time, if 20 years later you see other folks doing better than you and you wonder what happened, probably you did not make that lifestyle change and that other person did. That is, most of the time, that's the fact, right? It's interesting because I was thinking to myself, somebody was bringing up this guy's podcast, right? Ramit Sethi, I think is his name. He does a podcast and he has like a Netflix show and it's like called How to Be Rich. And he does a podcast where he talks about finances with couples. I haven't watched the podcast, but I was reading a few of his tweets and he brought up some common salient themes among couples. And there's a lot of things like unwillingness to change lifestyles, unwillingness to say no to stuff, right? And not being able to communicate to each other. And I found it very perplexing because, neither me or my wife are American, but apparently American couples have a hard time with this because, it's a very consumerist lifestyle. So it's like a true thing, right? But like, I have no frame of reference. My family always saved a lot because, in Nepal, you kind of have to save a lot, right? If you spend a lot, then, you're going to be broke. And there's no such thing as a consumerist culture. You're always trying to be frugal. You try to figure out where you can save more. And it's interesting because I did not grow up in that consumerist culture. And so it was like a lot of things came easier to me. So I have some empathy because it's not as simple as like, oh, just change your life, because the entire life could be around consuming stuff, certain brands, whatever. But, if you do that, then you're probably going to be broke your entire life and wonder where things are. My frame of reference is like, Nepal people are saving money. All the Nepali people I know in the US are also like very frugal like me. All the people I know own homes. They have good finances. And it's because they come from the same mentality. They do not care about consuming. They'd rather live cheaply and frugally and not be very show-offy. And in turn, be much wealthier because of it. Like, I do not know a single Nepali person who is maybe not my age, like in the late 30s, 40s, who does not own a home and does not have kids. So for me, my frame of reference is very skewed. So that's why I have like a very good sense of it. I'm like, I do not care about like brand name stuff. Like, I use like a $500 notepad as my laptop, and like my phone is very old, and I'm actually switching to a much cheaper dumb phone, the one without any of the smartphone features. There's a lot of things like that, and that's why it's been easier for me. But I recommend people to change their frame of reference and think about things less in the consumerist mold and more in like, how can I do better for my future self sort of mold. All right. Let's talk more about strategy, right? I talked a little bit about this in my post, but the main thing you want to do at each payday is do something which is called the payday flow. You want to pay yourself first, which sounds counterintuitive because you're not actually paying yourself immediately. You're paying your future self. So here's the flow chart, right? You get paid, let's say you get paid like $4,000 every pay period, just an example. Then before that money even hits your checking account and you're able to spend it, it's already going into your emergency account. It's already going into your tax advantaged accounts like 401k match, HSA, Roth IRA, etc. It's already going into your brokerage account. This could be your wealth fund for a home purchase or a runway fund, or something for a goal that you're aspiring to. And this is where you want to keep liquid stuff as well. And only after all of that, you put that into your checking account, and this should be enough to pay for your bills, etc., and a little bit of fun money, and daily spending. That way, let's say you make $4,000 and you need $2,000. $2,000 that is not your daily expenses can be invested before it even hits your checking account. So you have no choice but to have that all invested. So that is one way to think about it. Pay yourself first, pay your future self first, and have an automated system like this. And I'll show you guys this. So in my Substack, I have links to like 4 different tools that I've built, sort of. There's something called the leaky bucket tool. And this is where you sort of track every single thing. And this is what I used myself, right? It was just like, if you really want to be strict about your finances, you need to know where every single penny is going. Use a tool like this, put down your expenses over here and be like, Uber and jot down the date. And it becomes much harder to justify spending money when you see where it is going and how much you're spending in total. So there's a pledge in the first tab, which is like, I pledge to use this tracker every day and know exactly how much money I spent. I have my personal budget tracker over here. So this is for the months of years of 2026 and 2027. So you have your paycheck, your other incomes, one-time incomes or expenses, high yield savings on Roth IRA. The idea is like you track for every month all of this, so you have like a broad estimate, and then you use the leaky bucket tool to know that you're hitting those goals. And I do it over a 2-year period because there's a lot of things that happen mid-year, right? April and May is when the new Roth IRA like income limits get announced, so you know how much you need to budget for. So just a 1-year thing is a little narrow-sighted. I like doing it in 2-year thing. So use this. I use this every day. I have another thing, which is the pay yourself first, how to do it in a proper way. And, it's like sort of looking at what are the things that are offered in your job and how you can make use of them. Speaking of things offered in your job, I have this office benefits guide. Same thing over here, right? Which is 401ks, which insurance should you choose? High deductible or preferred provider. A lot of things over there. I recommend you guys look at this. There's a lot for me to cover, so I also want to make sure that you can take the time to read on yourself, all about yourself, and ask me questions if you have any. But this entire Google Drive is on my Substack. Feel free to check it out, download it, adapt it for your own use cases. And if you have any questions, just ask me directly. pratikkarki@substack.com. You can just email me there. All right, back to the presentation. So pay yourself first. Make sure that your future self is getting the money before you even do. That way you can have your hands off of any expenses that might be there otherwise if you have extra money. And And the third step is, once you have, let's say, taken care of your debt, what are you going to do then? And I don't think I mentioned how to take care of your debt, but the simple strategy, and this is what I used, is something called the snowball strategy. I think it was pioneered by Dave Ramsey. You want to take the highest interest debt and pay it down aggressively while putting just enough on the other ones. So if one thing has 10% interest rate and others have like 5%, pay down the ones with the highest interest rate immediately while maintaining the other ones. And once you have that taken care of, whatever is the surplus, you put that into the second highest interest rate. So if you're aggressively paying the 10% down thing, you finish it, then whatever is that surplus, let's say you're making $1,200 a month into that highest interest pile, move that $1,200 into the second highest interest pile, let's say it was 8%. And that way that'll snowball very quickly. And once you have that taken care of, let's say you have like a third highest one, which is 5%. You take that, all of that amount that you've been paying, and snowball it into the smallest interest rate, and you'll be paying it off very quickly. That's what I used. I had like a few loans, like credit card was like the one that I had to crack first because that has like an absurdly high interest rate. And then there's like student loans. One of them was 6.5%. The other one was 5%. So I did the 6.5% first and then the 5% one. So pay down your debts, figure out a plan, and then focus on growth. Invest in your company's 401k match. No matter what you do, you do not have to max it out, but at least meet the max because that is free money. If your company offers a 3% 401k match and you're not even contributing 3%, then you're just throwing away money. Because if you can put $3,000 and get free $3,000 tax-free, that is money that you're like losing like crazy. So do not do that to yourself. The next step is invest early as possible. If you can do it in your 20s, amazing. Even when I was in college, I didn't have much money, right? This is like a couple of $100. Like I think I put like 1,000 into Dogecoin and everything, but even that like grew up quite a bit. I had some money in GameStop. When I was early in Google, I put money into QQQ was a good investment. And a few years later, I put a good amount of money into NVIDIA, and that was a really, really good investment. And obviously I did a lot of due diligence there. But the main thing is you want to start early, even like distributed funds like a 401k. More money you put into earlier, it has the effect of growing over time, which is what you want. It effectively doubles your money every 5 to 7 years. And you can use loopholes like a backdoor Roth. The backdoor Roth is a very interesting tool and I'll talk more about it in detail in like a later thing because it deserves its own thing. But essentially, if you make too much for the traditional Roth IRA, you can essentially put into backdoor Roth by like putting it into traditional and then immediately transferring it. And Roth is amazing because you pay taxes on it immediately, but anything after that point is tax-free. So, and assuming tax rates are going to rise in the future, which they will, because there's not enough money for social securities, that's when it's going to be super important. The next step is you want to live super lean in your 20s as much as possible. I mean, people say like, oh, spend money, or like people finally get like a big paycheck and they go crazy, and guess what? They suffer a bit. $2,000 you can put into like a Gucci handbag will be a shit ton of money by the time in like 5 to 7 years. So do not splurge on useless stuff. Do some due diligence on the stocks you buy. Don't look at hype trains. Look at the financials. See what the stock is priced based on their revenue, and you can do a lot of good due diligence over there before you buy. And look at the industry. Like I invested a lot into like nuclear power recently, for example. So I'm gonna end with my favorite segment, which is what have I been reading, watching / playing. The first is this movie called Whack-A-Mole. It's hilarious. It's like Downton Abbey meets Naked Gun. It is very, very funny. I recommend everybody watch it. Amazing movie. I read this book called The Captain Class. It's talking about like what makes the elite teams, right? And it's like teams like New England Patriots with Tom Brady, or Ferenc Puskás, the Hungarian national team, and some very interesting insights. The fact that the best captains are not normally the superstars like LeBron James or Michael Jordan. In fact, a lot of times they are like underdogs, but they have like this win-it-all mentality. And the thing that they hate the most is seeing the team lose. They want to win no matter what. So it's a great book. A lot about like leadership and business as well. I read this very interesting paper on like memory data leakage and prompt injection exploitation. These researchers created a tool called EchoLeak, and they actually tried it on Microsoft Copilot. And without like even like user input, they're able to jailbreak Microsoft Copilot. I recommend people read this because it's very important learning about LLM safety and AI safety alignment, and what works versus what doesn't. All right, so this should wrap it for this week. Sorry I had to rush through at the end. I'm trying to like learn how to pace myself better, but I normally speak too much in the beginning and speak too little at the end. Any feedback would be appreciated in this category. Remember to subscribe at my Substack, pratikkarki.substack.com, and DM me your questions. I'm very happy to like look at your questions and give any financial insights, etc. Have a very good New Year's and happy holidays, Merry Christmas, everything. This is going to be like the final podcast of the year, but thank you all for tuning in. I really appreciate the support. See you all next year, and I'm very excited to share my plans for next year.